What's going on, Dolphins? It's your boy Dillon. Making a quick video today. Got a, as of right now, I don't really have a whole lot of news, but got some things I want to talk to you about. I got a question that I wanted to answer and a comment that I wanted to talk about a little as well. So first, the question comes from James Snee. He notes that we're going to see, Gase twice a year now, obviously, because he's going to be in New York with the Jets. He asks me if I believe that our new coach would be jealous if, the players were like going around, talking to Gase during the game, or obviously not necessarily during the game, but like, being buddy-buddy with him, like before the game or after the game or whatever. And my answer to that is no, I don't think so. I mean, after all, it is, their profession. This is what they do. So, I can't, and even if the coach was jealous, about or upset in some sort of way that like his players were going and being buddy-buddy with the ex-coach, I doubt he would show it. Whoever the next coach is going to be. I mean, if it was Darren Rizzi, then absolutely not, for sure. Now, the really interesting part about that, though, is, as I had said before, I personally believe, and from all the information and stuff I have with the way that, players talked about Gase, in all records, before, like when Gase first got hired and throughout his 3 years, all the players and all the coaches and everybody loved him. He was great. When he did get fired, you had like Albert Wilson and Kenny Stills and others coming out to his defense. He had tons of people that were lining up, like literally lining up at his office to wish him well and wish him goodbye. So I think all of those reports that he had a fractured locker room were just factually inaccurate, first of all. And second of all, I think he really did actually build the kind of culture that we wanted. And that's part of the reason why I believe that, Stephen Ross pulled the plug prematurely and it's going to backfire on him. And I think that it's possible that, some of these players and stuff that really did like Gase, that, came here to work with Gase and so on and so forth. And you commingle that with the fact that apparently we're doing this big reset on the entire organization. Unfortunately, I foresee a possibility in which we start losing a lot of these, key players and, really good players that we have currently, because they don't even want to be here anymore at this point, because they see what is going on within the organization. But we'll see. That's another one of those things that obviously only time will tell. Unfortunately, at this moment, it's not looking too good from my perspective and from the information and the data that I have, which is obviously not 100% complete, because I'm not an insider. I don't spend time with team officials or anything like that. So, my information base is limited, and I admit that, right? But what I deduce from the information that I have is, not, it does not appear as if there's going to be favorable outcomes, when it comes to stuff like that. But again, only time will tell. And again, I hope I'm wrong. So, Jay Cray, he commented, he says, because he doesn't quite agree with, my perspective on, Gase being hired by the Jets, and that's cool. I understand that. He says that he thinks it's awesome. Gase is not that great. Well, that's a matter of opinion. I personally believe, as I've said many times, that Gase got tons of criticism and heat and got shit on for either absolutely ridiculous things like supporting his quarterback. Like, really? You want your head coach to not support his starting quarterback? That's crazy. Or for, sitting on the sideline, coming up with plays for his next offensive series when things are not going, so hot in the game. And he's got other staff members. It's not like he's the only coach on the team. He has other staff members, managing the game and watching things. And he could see things going on. He could see it on the replay boards. He's got his headset on. So it's not like he was totally checked out. Those things are ridiculous, in my opinion, to criticize him for. On top of that, then you have things, that were completely out of his control. So let's get into this a little bit. He says anything over 3rd and 7 is unmanageable for him. Well, most teams have a hard time with 3rd and 7 or longer. Now, if you look at the reasons why we were in 3rd and 7 or longer, you have a couple primary culprits. So one is, and I'm going to say this a couple times throughout, you have injuries. That plays a big role. I know people don't really understand that, but that plays a big role because you got to change your schemes. The chemistry with the people that are coming in is different, especially with things like the offensive line, the chemistry between receivers and the quarterback, right? So that plays a huge role. The offensive line play, which has not been good, or was not good for a good portion of the season after Kilgore and Sitton were lost for the year, that plays a huge role. If on 3rd and 7 or longer, it's a expected passing down. What happens if your quarterback has like 0.1 seconds in the pocket before he gets sacked? Of course he's not going to be able to convert that. Of course. Then you have penalties. So I was fair. I believe anytime there was a pre-snap penalty or something, on a player that was legit, I called it out. And there were plenty of times. If you follow me on Twitter, you would see that. Eventually, when I get a camera that's, capable of doing live streams, which I expect to have for sure before next season, I will do live streams during the games and so on and so forth, so you can see my, instant reactions and hear what I have to say. But penalties too. But some of that was on just the terrible officiating that ran rampant throughout the entire league the entire year. So point is a lot of those things were just uncontrollable. Like you do your best. He did his best. Let's see, what else did he say? So again, I just think a lot of that was very unfair to put on Gase. Let's see. Then he said, we saw that Gase had some good games, but his eye for talent is not there. I don't agree with that. First and foremost, the talent, yes, Gase had the final say over the 53-man roster. That is true. But Tannenbaum and Chris Greer play into that, right? Particularly when it comes to drafts, but also when it comes to free agents. Okay, they got Wilson right, except for the fact that, again, he got injured. One of the 13 people that ended the year on injured reserve. They got tons of our recent draft picks, right? Minka Fitzpatrick, Xavier Howard, Kenyon Drake, Laramie Tunsil has become an elite player. Charles Harris is started off slow in his first couple years, but I believe he's getting better, and I believe he's picking it up. Did I mention Minka Fitzpatrick? I think I did. Raekwon McMillan and Jerome Baker, they improved all season and got better and better and better. So to say that he doesn't have an eye for talent, first of all, it's not all on him. Second of all, again, you make the best decisions you can. So he gives a couple examples. So first he says Cutler. Okay, well, he didn't have his starting quarterback, right? Because obviously Tannehill was going to be out with that knee injury. What were the options? There weren't really any options. We had Matt Moore, right, on the team. So all of the options that were out there were either not as good as Matt Moore, or, there were obviously other things too, like, he was familiar with Gase's system and so on and so forth. But really, the only two quarterbacks that you could even think about taking or bringing in my opinion, and I didn't like Cutler at all. I think he sucked, so on and so forth. But Again, he did have familiarity with Gase. He did know the system, you know, so on and so forth. And it was super short notice. And again, the only other quarterback really that I say and that I personally would have preferred would have been Colin Kaepernick. Now, whether, you know, like for me, I don't see the big deal. I think that it's bullshit that he's getting shit on and blackballed for trying to stand up for social justices, you know, whatever. But a lot of people would have disagreed with that, particularly in South Florida, because it's a high, you know, Cuban population, and they just disagreed with Colin Kaepernick because he wore a Fidel Castro t-shirt. Whatever, his support or lack thereof for Fidel Castro and what is, you know, specific, that's irrelevant in my mind. So he did the best he could in that situation. Osweiler, yeah, Osweiler sucks. But the thing is, though, is Osweiler is actually a decent backup, right? And if he has to come in for 1 or 2 games, it's not a big deal, right? So Gase brought him in because he's, again, familiar with him. He knows the system, all that and the other. And he was hoping that he didn't have to, you know, play him at all, first of all. Or if he did, it might only be a game or 2. But unfortunately, because, again, injuries, it started when we lost Sitton, then Kilgore, and then in the Bengals game, then we lose Tunsil. And that's why we ended up losing, because Tannehill just got... He was under siege at that point. Just viciously under siege at that point. And that's why the mistakes we're making, and that's ultimately ended up why, or ultimately, that ended up ultimately being why, gotta get my English right here, why he got hurt and then missed 6 games, 5 or 6 games, whatever it was. And that's why Brock Osweiler ended up coming in and getting exposed. He's not a great quarterback. He's not even really a good quarterback, but he's a decent backup. And if he's got to come in for spot duty, okay, so I understand that. He says Burke. Again, I believe that Burke got far too much criticism than he deserved. Again, man, we lost so many people, and one of the things that drives me crazy is people will sit there and blame him for shit, but they don't understand how impactful it is when, you know, you lose Xavier Howard, when you lose William Hayes for the year, and Vincent Taylor for the year, when Bobby McCain spends time out, when Rashad Jones spends time out, when TJ McDonald spends time out, when Cam Wake spends time out, when Charles Harris spends time out, when Andre Branch spends time out. People don't understand how that changes the chemistry and the scheme and all of that shit. They don't realize it, and they don't have an understanding or a grasp of it because they're not coaches and they're not there. And it drives me crazy that people sit there and assume that they know better when they just really don't, you know? And it's impossible for them to, because they're not in those situations and they don't really get it, right? So anyway... and then he says that he's marked down 2 wins for next season. Well, I hope so. You know, I hope we end up sweeping the Jets next season, and I hope that all of my predictions or whatever, or all the things that I have said about this situation, I hope I'm wrong about it. I hope we have a tremendous year, amazing year next year. You know, I do wish Adam Gase all the best, and I hope he has success. But when we play him, I hope we do beat him, you know, so on and so forth. But unfortunately, again, with the information that I have, it seems to me that all that data, all that information and those factors are going to add up to disaster for us. And again, we can only wait and see because we don't yet have the results. You know, we'll know a lot after this upcoming year. You know, and then one final thing that I want to say is that when people sit there and start saying that injuries are just being used in his excuse, okay, first and that, you know, all teams get injured and that it's next man up mentality. Okay, I get that. I absolutely do. But here's the thing, right? Yes, injuries happen to everybody, and, you know, other teams don't give a shit who's injured, which actually is not true. They absolutely do. When Xavier Howard wasn't in, I guarantee teams were loving the fact that Xavier Howard was not in, and they could victimize either Torrey McTyer or Cornell Armstrong, one of our rookies or whatever. absolutely other teams care about that shit. So it's almost like the politics of football, right? So they say that for reasons, but it's not entirely true, okay? And so think about this, right? Let's say you owned a business, right? Let's say you owned a business. Let's say it's a construction business. And let's say because of whatever reason, nothing, out of your control, you run the business well, you train people well, so on and so forth. But let's just say that you have a construction business and you have, let's say, 20 people that work for you. Imagine half of those people get injured. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Frankly, if a construction business that had 20 employees had 10 of them get injured on the job, even if it wasn't their fault, even if there was no negligence, even if they trained their guys well, even if they made sure they wore, hard hats and all that stuff, but somehow just they managed to get hurt, half of their crew, or half of the crew, what do you think's going to happen to the business? And of course you got to make adjustments, and the more people you continue to lose, the more adjustments that you need to make, and of course things are going to eventually start to break down. We were one of the most injured teams in the league this year. It's not an excuse, it's a reason. And frankly, anytime any team has injuries, they're not excuses, they're reasons. It's like calling it excuse is essentially saying that that it doesn't exist, right? Like, or that it shouldn't exist. Like, come on, dude, you have 53 people that you start the year with. When you start losing guys, that is impactful. Now, if you only lose a couple guys throughout the year, or whatever, then okay, you can probably overcome that. But when you lose half of your starting lineup, and then tons of your backups start getting hurt, and so on and so forth, then I don't understand what people expect. And again, then it puts far too much blame on people for things that they shouldn't be getting blamed for. So anyway, that's how I view it. That's how I see things, so on and so forth. I hope that I was able to answer James Snee, your question, about our next coach and whether or not he'd be jealous and so on and so forth. And then, I hope that, again, we don't have to agree on everything. So, Jay Cray has his opinions. He disagrees with me a bit on this, and that's fine. But I like having the conversations. And again, I just like to be at least a different voice, a different perspective for you guys. So that way, because I aim to, give reasonable and logical evaluations. And I like to provide facts and evidence and context, full context. I'm not one of those kind of people that sits there and just harps on individual points, and I'm certainly not one of those kind of people that harps on just, very specific negative aspects of things. I like to make sure that I have full context so I can get a full and proper evaluation. So I hope I can provide that to you guys. I hope you guys think that I provide that. Obviously there's haters, and if they hate, they hate, and it is what it is. After all, it is my show. I do the show, so I'm going to do it how I want. Obviously, if you guys have recommendations, things you want to see, put them out there, and we can talk about it. And, I've already adopted some changes that people have suggested to me. So, at the very least, we can discuss it, we can talk about it, and if it feels to me like it'll add value, then I'll definitely do it. And again, there have already been examples of me doing that. So I'm not going to just dismiss the things you guys say. I love interacting with you guys. I love your opinions. I love having these conversations with you. So anyway, I hope you guys do enjoy what I do and the information and so on and so forth that I put out for you guys. And if you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. Obviously, again, I love interacting with you guys. And so I hope you guys like to interact with me. It's a lot of fun. And then, of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I'm out. I will see y'all soon. Fins up.